John, so good to see you.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be here, Carlos. Always fun to chat, geek out on this stuff with you.
Yeah, no, I gotta admit, you are one of my favorite people to do intellectual sparring with. And I was
Yeah, no, it's
go ahead.
yeah, it's we've had some aligned views and misaligned views in our times. It's been good to always chat with you. Always fun.
Yeah, but always stay friends. So for people in the audience that are just joining us, John and I have had a long history of business friendship, and also we're partners on our businesses, and we've done a lot of business together. But we find our chats and intellectual debates extremely stimulating, but always can go and have a beer after after a discussion. So today I'm super excited, John, because I gotta admit, and you know this, and I'm not shy to say that um, I've been a very vocal critic of AI detectors for many reasons, which we will get deep into it during our session today. So really was looking forward to have you here so we can have again another debate around those and really kind of debunk some of the myths and misunderstanding and help our audience to understand the role of AI detectors a little bit better, right? And really, at the end of the day, we want our audience or shared audiences to walk away with actionable takeaways or a piece of education or maybe something that they didn't know and now got clarified. That's the goal of today. So for everybody in the audience, this is going to be a fireside chat, so no presentation. We don't want to kill you via PowerPoint. So feel free to ask anything. I'm going to be always monitoring the chat or the Q&A and making sure I can ask any of your questions. So, John, again, thanks for joining us on this webinar. Why don't you give our audience a very brief introduction of your work and why are you qualified to talk about this, the impact of AI and content marketing, and of course AI detectors and everything that goes around that.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Thanks for having me. And yeah, happy to yeah, I think try and educate and yeah, help people understand the limitations and usefulness or at times in the right settings of detection. So my background, went to school to be an engineer, worked in oil and gas for a number of years, always wanted to get back to my hometown, built up a bunch of online businesses. Those businesses were always focused around content marketing, hiring writers, publishing content on the web, ranking in Google, monetizing that traffic, display ads, software business, and e-commerce business. And then that led to building a content marketing business. Post that content marketing business, started Originality. And so Originality is an AI detection business and overall content quality QA/QC system. It launched the weekend before ChatGPT launched, and then we've been sort of trying to ride that wave and help the world understand the limits and the sort of upside and the sometimes downside to the use of generative AI content.
Yeah, so John has been in content marketing for many years, so he's definitely an authority in the topic of content marketing and content creation. But he's also a fascinating, multifaceted individual. And this is for another time. But John also has some offline businesses, right? You have a bakery. Do you still own the bakery and also
On the bakery.
a pool maintenance business?
Yeah, pool business, bakery, had another food and beverage business, but it went to zero. So that I got two.
Yeah, well, we want to spend a little time on that, but just just for all of you to understand the breadth of John's background. But let's start like let's jump right in and let's go into the deep end of the pool. But to give everybody a little bit of context, can you explain like you would explain to your 5-year-old kid how do AI detectors work?
Yeah. So imagine a human sitting in a room in a warehouse, and they have a pile of papers that have been written by a human and a pile of papers that have been written by AI. And that person sits there and for years reads a human paper, reads an AI paper, reads a human paper, and starts to recognize a bunch of crazy patterns between them. And that's essentially what our AI does, is it consumes a ton of AI content, a ton of human content, and then AI is really good at recognizing patterns where humans would struggle to recognize those patterns. And specifically the AI of a classifier, which our model is, And so we have the way it detects AI content is it recognize patterns that show up in AI content that doesn't show up in human content.
Okay. And I know you're also using LLMs to detect LLMs, right? So it's
Yep.
like a cop catching a cop. So, and both cops were trained in a similar way. So how can, if both are kind of similar tools, how can one really stay on top of the earth? I don't know if my question makes sense, but
Yep.
it's like using ChatGPT to detect ChatGPT, right? It's probably this very simplistic way to put it, I know, but yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say there's a few different ways of detecting AI. So there's detectors that are called, like, I'll call them bag of word detectors, where it's like, hey, this perplexity showed up, or this readability score AI content usually falls into that camp, or this word shows up often. Those don't work because of the diversity of content that AI is able to create. And then the LLMs are used, but there's also other types of machine learning algorithms that get used. So a classifier is a different version than a large language model. And so the behind the scenes, like behind, fully behind the curtain, there's multiple models that are all used to result in the output of saying AI or not, and the confidence score. So yes, LLMs are used. And then I think, and maybe that's sort of another question, but like it's interesting to see the sort of evolution of LLMs and then the detection capability as LLMs have gotten better. Sort of initially, I expected the capability of detection to fall off, but that hasn't been the case.
Okay. So if I can read it back to you, so basically what you're saying is that you're using LM, but it combined with a number of other tools that help with the detection, right?
Yeah, and it's still AI tools, like still like machine learning algorithms, but not necessarily the same like model as a large language model.
Okay, fair enough. So if I think this is where it's interesting to see this kind of competition between the LLMs that are being used to create content and the AI detectors. So the LLM businesses, let's say Google with their own LLM, and of course, OpenAI with ChatGPT and Anthropic and Perplexity. These are extremely well-funded companies, and sometimes Google has more money than God. So how can smaller companies like Originality or some other companies that probably don't have the same amount of resources really stay ahead to kind of catch or to be able to detect the use of AI, when they are competing with these behemoths with so much resources, with so much access to technology and the most powerful brains in the world. So how do you how do you keep up?
Yeah, no, I'd say it's been one of the most interesting takeaways over the last kind of year. Like, we launched, call it 2 years ago, roughly. Especially with the rate early on, I thought like, oh, new model's going to come out and we're not going to be able to detect anything. It's, infant mortality risk was ever present. What's been interesting is in this sort of broader debate of are large language models hitting a plateau of intelligence, where they're seeing diminishing returns, billions, like, I don't know the numbers, but assume like 10x the rate of capital has flowed in over the last since ChatGPT than the same period of time pre ChatGPT. Yet the evolution has from GPT-2 to GPT-3 to GPT-4. It has not felt exponential in terms of each, like the leap from GPT-2 to GPT-3. Most people didn't use GPT-2, and there's a reason for that. It was absolute crap. GPT-3 was decent. Jasper was a decent tool. It created reasonable content. GPT-4 was better. GPT-4o, a little better, not a ton better. And so what we have seen is that as models have gotten bigger, they've gotten better, predictably better, but that rate of growth of intelligence has not been exponential and has certainly not been correlated with the amount of capital that has gone into the space. And then that we've sort of seen that firsthand in terms of our detection capabilities, where each new model that comes out, our detection capability drops off very little. So every time a new model comes out, we need to collect data from that model, train it, train our detector on it, and close that gap. And when GPT-4 came out, our accuracy dropped off significantly. We've been trained on GPT-3 data. GPT-4 came out, produced very different types of text, and our accuracy rate dropped off. GPT-4o came out, we're like, oh, we're still just as accurate. Claude 3 to Claude 3.5, oh, we're still just as accurate. Very little drop off has been happening with the newest models coming out. And I'd say that's contributing to sort of my sort of belief in that the LLMs are hitting a bit of an intelligence plateau. And then when you sort of peel back the layer, it's like, it's all the same technology in terms of transformers. It's all the same data they've consumed, the common crawl web index, same foundational technology, transformers, same hardware of like NVIDIA GPUs that they're being trained on. And so the model output has the sort of the variability of the model output has been reducing.
Okay. So if as a user, should somebody expect that when there is a new model coming out for any of these platforms, there will be some volatility? There may or may not be changes in the detection accuracy, but there might still be the probability that there might be volatilities.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think that's for sure true. Is that new models introduce new opportunities for the accuracy score to drop off for sure.
and when that's going to happen, of course, like everybody's always kind of in the lookout for new models and the announcement. But how do you manage that with your user base? Do you let them know, hey, there will be some volatility over the next weeks or so? How do you guys handle all that?
Yeah, so we two ways. One, we have sort of well, it's kind of maybe three, but we have a reporting team that will always be sort of create as quick a data set off the model as possible, run it through our tool, evaluate the efficacy, and then report on that. Can new model be detected? And we try and complete that within a week. And then we have our AI research team where if that model drops off significantly, we make sure that the research team starts to build a proper training data set to train the model on and close that gap. And then that's sort of like, those are pretty straightforward. We always do that. And then there's sometimes more creative ways of like a new model might create some kind of like multimodal approach that when combined with some other adversarial technique produces a bypassing sort of attack. And so we have a red team that's always out trying to beat our tool. So trying to find every strategy possible to try and beat the blue team's detector. So that team's always spinning and is always using any new tool that comes out to try and see what it can do. So that's kind of never had a business that had a red team. It's really fun.
Yeah, well, that sounds fun. I want to be invited to that one. But what kind of things do they try to? And you don't have to spill the beans and tell us all the secrets, but what kind of things do they do to try to fool the detector?
Yeah, so early on, using a paraphraser was a really effective way of bypassing detection. That was easy enough to close. Just built the data set on, like, it's still a machine that's doing it. We've discovered recently some some pretty interesting but dumb ways of helping to bypass detectors of using ANSI characters that look like letters. So then which I know your audience is mostly like web content, is a really bad idea, because bypassing, like having that happen and then bypass detection and then publishing it, you're publishing content that search engine machines can't read. So anyway, we're closing that. That's an easy gap to close. So we're closing that, but that's one that was recently identified. So instead of an A, it's a symbol that looks like A is used.
Yeah.
And just swapping them out the whole time. So that's and then most bypassers work on just massively increasing the the amount that you're surprised by the content. So the burstiness and perplexity is sort of commonly how it's called. And then the result is you've got some like grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes, weird formatting throughout. Most bypassing content is pretty low quality that you wouldn't want to use or wouldn't accept from a writer.
Yeah, let's double click on burstiness, because I think that's one of the things that is a term that gets thrown around. I don't know if everybody understands it, but how I understand it, and John, please feel free to correct me, is the variability of the flow of the writing. So and the other way to look at it, one of the ways that we detect AI, like by pattern recognition and really by the naked eye, is that AI writing is extremely clean, too clean, right? Like so that's what, like, it's very uniform, perfectly grammatically correct, but like for a company like us that has consumed so much content and produced so much content, it's easy for us to identify when something is not as clean, right? Like and human, because we are imperfect, we're not usually as, even the best writers are not as clean. So do you have more variability, or the content is less uniform, or is that, am I in the right track?
So I've got there's some interesting studies that have come out related to sort of humans' capability of detecting AI. And so, yes, you're right. Burstiness is the writers will use the same words in bursts. So if you're using the word, through delve is a common one. If you're using the word delve, you'll use it in a burst within a section of text. Whereas AI will use it very consistently, to your point, throughout the entire article. Perplexity is how much an LLM is surprised at the next word. So if it's like the cow who jumped over the moon. Anyways, we'll say the dog jumped over and then what comes next, and how surprised are you at the next word, and that's perplexity. And so it's like the fence would be common. The pen would be a pretty surprising word that the dog jumped over, but hadn't ever existed. So those are sort of measures of randomness. Humans produce more random content than AI. The point that I think it's humans, especially those of us that have some sense of expertise in the area, have some cognitive biases at play that lead us to think we are far more capable of detecting AI content than we actually can. If you ask a room who's an above average driver, studies have shown 70 to 80% of the room puts up their hand. We have a overconfidence bias as humans, especially when it's an area where we see a lot of writing. You run a content writing agency. I have, and I'm in this space. I think I can identify AI generated content. All studies have shown that humans' capability of detecting AI content is like 60%. Slightly better than flip up a coin. And so you're correct in that, especially ChatGPT early days, the content that got produced was extremely consistent. If you didn't ask it to do anything different, it would be very consistent. If you now ask it, GPT-4o, to say, write me a Nobel Physics Prize in the style of Dave Chappelle, totally wild, it will produce content that would be impossible to tell the difference from a human to an AI writing that, because you've asked it to go off on a voice. And so if you don't ask it to go off on a voice, the voice of ChatGPT or other AIs is recognizable. I agree. Humans can see, but if you ask it to do anything that produces deviation from its normal tone, it becomes unrecognizable to humans.
Okay, so that's an interesting point. So what you're saying, if you train the model or prompted it well enough to kind of train on certain voice that is very specific, so that's also like a lot of people don't understand voice. And I say this with love, trust me, because I think it's very abstract concept, right? So what we get, and I probably you have this experience, 90% of the clients say, oh, I want it to be professional but casual. Like that's not voice. That's just words. That's not even anything, because that doesn't. So a voice is, like you said, in the voice of Dave Chappelle. But even within that, there could be many variations of Dave Chappelle, right? Is it
Mhm.
Dave Chappelle before he was he was out of the spotlight, or Dave Chappelle after, right? Or it can get very very complex. But if you're not using a very well-known figure where there is enough content out there to train the LLM, but you just give him a bunch of parameters. Let's say, I want you to be funny, but just not so funny, or not, irreverent. Like, is that? Do you think that will also get the LLM to deviate enough to fool a detector, or to pull a human? I'm sorry, to pull a human.
Fool human, yeah. I so I'd say short answer is yes. I'd say anything that pushes it away from its consistent voice is enough to decrease the capability of a human to detect it. If you just ask it to, like, hey, write me a blog post on the best writing notebook, write me an SEO blog post on the best writing notebook. I think we will probably see, you know, in the world of digital, in the digital age, we let us delve into the topic of, like, there will be some tells that will allow us to think that, yep, that's probably AI and humans will detect it. If you give it any instructions to go off on a different path, that it will drop the accuracy rate of humans' capability.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I laugh, because that's how, if you just give it a prompt to ChatGPT with no voice or nothing, that's what it will say in this day and age of digital
Yeah.
transformation. Let's delve into
Yeah.
it's so funny. So, there's some telltale signs. And definitely one of the things that we have noticed, and again, we don't believe the human eye is perfect either. It can be full 100%. But really there's as you know, and you're a guy that probably like these kind of topics, like psychology, and the thinking fast and slow, that kind of, there's some things that our brain can recognize that we cannot really articulate what it is, but there's something off about this. So that's another way.
Yep.
Like, you read it, and then you have that nagging feeling that there's something off about this, and you cannot exactly say what it is, but so that's again, it's hard to scale that way, because you cannot scale
Yep.
gut feel, but it's not gut feel, it's really like how your brain works. Anyway, I'm just getting esoteric topics. So let's change here. So it seems that you're very very confident about the technology, very confident about how AI detectors can function. So why do you think they have such a bad reputation?
Yeah, they're not perfect. So I haven't said that. Like that, like, if humans are at 60%, AI detectors are at 90, depends on the content, but 98%, 99%, with a 2.5%, 3% false positive rate. That is a false positive rate that inflicts pain. We understand that. And what so they have a bad rap because the claims that have been made have been rarely rooted in transparent studies, and it's very easy to sort of crap on AI detectors when they get it wrong, because they do get it wrong, and they can get things embarrassingly wrong. The same way that Google's AI summaries have gotten a lot of things embarrassingly wrong, even though if you had to sort of like go through every one of their answers, I have yet to make it get one wrong. But I've got a lot of examples of times that it's gotten runs wrong. So I mean, we're certainly not dealing with the volume of Google AI summaries. But when you're running a lot of content through it, and it becomes a societally important thing that is occurring, and you get things wrong, it can negatively impact. Although I believe we're on the side of writers. I understand why writers can be very frustrated when they poured their heart and soul into a piece of work, and a detector gets it wrong. It costs them money, it costs them reputation. It's painful. I get it. I wish they were perfect, but they're not. And so I think that's why they get a bad rap.
Yeah, it's funny because say they're probably 98% accurate, but that's better than most of contraception methods. I would say with a vasectomy, like 99% chances that
Yeah.
that it will work. So I mean, that's pretty good. Do you think then there is a matter of education and also, like you said, false claims? Because I think and what we've seen with some clients say, oh, I want you to run into this detector and it has to hit this particular score. And like, well,
Yeah.
that's not the right approach. That's kind of some take, but you are the expert. So like, what are people missing on the education part?
Yeah. So there's a few pieces of the education part that I think are like wrong right now. That we're in a world. I mean, we're in Canada, so we're less polarized than maybe our neighbors to the south. But I think it's very easy to be polarized in camps. AI detectors are BS. AI detectors are perfect. Those are two camps that are both wrong. And so I think that leads to education and like confirmation bias around looking for information that confirms what their view. And so it's really tough because if you're hiring a lot of writers, you want to have a systematic machine and be able to apply something like plagiarism, where it's like, if this exists, kick it out. Here's the score that we tolerate. I totally understand why people want to use the tool in that way. It's currently unfortunate that the level of performance of the tool does not allow for that level of binary certainty and classification. So I'd say writers also, I think, miss some things that result in their content being tagged as AI. Heavy use of AI in research. So we have a lot of cases where people will use AI for research and then rewrite it and then think that they've done enough work to call that human content, which potentially they did, but in the eye, there's still enough fingerprint from the AI that it gets identified as AI, and then the writer feels like it's a false positive. The tool knows that AI was involved. So that's sort of things that trigger the detection, is a bit of an education piece. And then the score is probably one of the biggest pieces. And so if the score says 70% chance of AI, 30% chance of being human, or let me use the flipped example, 70% chance of 70% human, 30% AI, that is the tool saying, I think it was human and I'm 70% confident. Not that 70% of it was AI, 70% of it was human, 30% of it was AI. And so if you've poured your heart and soul out, you're a 30-year experienced writer, you've written this thing, you put it into the tool, and then it says anything other than 100% human, you can get offended by that because you're like, no, this was 100% human. And the tool, even if it says 50%, 51% original, 49% AI, it still correctly identified it as human. It just wasn't very confident. And that lack of confidence isn't a reflection on the writer's quality.
Yeah, it's a reflection of the model content on itself. So that's what probabilities is they're simple, but it's something that is very easy to misinterpret, right?
Yes.
And that's what I think the biggest confusion is the score, right? The people think, oh, 7 out of every 10 words were written by AI, which that's not the case at all. What it's saying is like, it might be AI, and I feel like if this person or this were to be written 10 times, 7 times would have been written by AI and 3 times would have been written by a human, right? Or I'm not articulating right.
Yeah, so I would say that's not it's correct. Hopefully it would identify it if that same article was submitted, created in the same way. Hopefully every one of those times it's going to identify it as AI. It's just going to share that its confidence in that prediction is only 70%. So it doesn't mean that like 30% of the time it's going to predict that as AI. It's going to say, no, this AI was heavily involved in the creation of this content enough that, and so the way we try and like, the way we try and classify like what should and shouldn't be called AI, and that's sort of a question that society is going to wrestle with, and we've got some attempting to solve that as well. But that it's AI was used enough that the the previous input. So if it was AI was involved in the rewriting of it, this output would be unrecognizable to that input, and it would pass plagiarism. And so that's sort of the final barrier to ensuring that content is original. And so it's correctly identifying that content was AI generated, and it's just communicating its level of confidence.
Yeah, but the thing with confidence, that's part of the problem. Like, and like in business, because business is not an exact science most of the time, right? It's like
Yep.
when you are looking at the performance of employees. And let's say these are employees that are kind of knowledge-based employees where their output is harder or their input is hard to measure. And you know when they're great and you know when they're terrible. That's easy to identify. The problem is when they're in
Yep.
the middle. They're kind of good,
Yep.
but not all the time. Like then you're like stuck in this limbo, which is very hard to make decisions about somebody's performance. Is it similar to architecture? Like when they're like in the no man land of 40 to 60% of confidence, like is like a coin flip, right? Like if you hit 50%, like well, I might as well flip a coin and decide, right? So how should people think about that?
Yeah. So it depends on the use case, is what I would say. And so I'd say the best, uh, if, for example, if a writer is receiving, let's say, consistently 90% original scores, 90% plus original scores, you have a relationship with that writer, and then you get an article that's, call it 60%. I would say that is a 60% original, all others have been 90%, and you want to make sure that all the content is human written, not AI generated, and they get that 60% score. That's a great. The tools probably correctly identified that was human written. For whatever reason, it reduced it was less confident than the previous work. And so I think most people have the most success when they are applying it as a binary predictor of either AI or not. However, are not taking binary action of like termination or not termination, but starting a conversation and using additional tools to go into that conversation. We have a recent case study from one of our literally today of one of our long-term writers where that was the case. So using it as a binary predictor of saying AI or not AI, great. We have our tool. We understand that the tool may or may not have been confident, but we are going to sort of then take the next steps of, okay, we thought this piece of work was AI, and we're now going to have another sort of set of procedures to follow to verify that no, it was either a false positive or yes, that was AI used. They weren't supposed to use AI, and then we will take whatever action makes sense.
Yeah, so what you're saying is this should be, so it's not black and white. That, I mean, it could be black and white result, but shouldn't be taking black and white action, right? So
Agreed.
if you get one report and the score is negative regarding to whatever you're looking for, then you shouldn't just make a decision just out of that one data point. It's better to have, like again, like in probabilities, it's better to have a bigger data set to have a less chance of error. However, sometimes like people cannot afford to, let's say you're hiring for writers, you cannot have them write 20 things and kind of so how should people think about that?
Yeah, so I'll talk through the example that's really fresh for us. So we have one of our long-term writers at Originality was hired in part because they are extremely passionate about being anti AI. All of their work had come back as original, and then one article came back as a high probability of being AI. We have, and so the editor did what our policy is of to go and sort of start looking into that. The way they looked into that was we have a Chrome extension which we make free for people because it's meant to help writers show that their work process. And so it takes all the metadata that exists within the Google document and then can create a recreation of the writing process. And so what the editor saw with this writer, so first reached out to them and said, hey, we just got a high AI score. And the writer replied back, no, that has to be a false positive. That's not the case. And then they set up a meeting, and the editor walked through with the writer the Chrome extension, which showed a 34-minute effort writing a 2,000 word article with very little editing and significant times where there was copy and paste of a large chunks of text. And so it's graphs the character count over time. And so a nice linear with a few like negatives where you've deleted some stuff. That's what the human creation curve looks like. But if you have a quick timeline with a bunch of copies and pastes, when the policy is do all your work in the Google document, so you have this extension to use, the writer ended up admitting that, yeah, that she'd started using AI, and this was the first time that she'd done it. And I don't know, we have to decide what we're going to do now, but yeah, so that's AI score to start an additional sort of conversation investigation. Not always possible, but that's I think the ideal way to use it.
Yeah, that's true. We've used a similar tool where you can track the keystrokes of the writer.
Yep.
I don't personally like it. I don't like to big brother people. I want to trust people or adults, but sometimes for some clients or some companies that are very adamant about this, you can use that. Are there any other mechanisms? I'm getting these question from the audience. Whatever gets flagged, what other tools you employ beyond this, the one that you mentioned about the extension for the Google document?
Yeah, the extension for the Google document, and then editor judgment. In terms of does this line up with it? Is it useful to the audience? Do you even, I haven't asked that question, but like, do you even care if AI was used? I mean, I think that's a decision that isn't always the cleanest answer. So no other tools. To answer the question directly, yeah, no other tools. It's the AI detection, and then the Chrome extension, and then a conversation to do that. If you're not able to track the changes in the document, is there any other option? Not that I know of.
John, what's the name of the extension that you mentioned?
So it's our own extension. So it's the Originality AI detection extension.
Okay,
and so it's free. The writer replay is free, and so we make that. The idea is that that's free to try and help writers show when there's been a false positive, because they can show their creation process. But then if you want to use the AI detection or plagiarism scoring, then you just need to hook up your API key.
Okay. So Kara Credle is asking, we have had writers tell us that they have submitted their human written content to Originality.ai before, and the result comes back as more AI written than not. How do you prevent false positives?
Yeah. So we're launching, so right now, we're launching a model that's called a light model. And so we'll have a light model, a standard model, and a turbo model. And then depending on your false positive, depending on your false positive threshold. So let's say you want no AI in your content, then you're using turbo. If you sort of want to, like, it's okay if the occasional one gets by you, but you want to make sure that humans are in the loop, they can use Grammarly. That's sort of the light model. So the different models for different use cases is part of it. And then how do you make sure the Chrome extension is the sort of the fail safe? So false positives happen in our testing 2.5% to 3% with the standard model, when 1% with the light model, which is going to come out soon, and then sort of a little higher with the turbo model, 3 to 5%. The fail safe, so when false positives do happen, the fail safe is to use the Chrome extension to have that conversation, to be able to look at how the content was created.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. So I'll share some of the ones that we use as well. Some of the methods that we use to prevent this. So if we get a flag by a model, by a detector, then we use other detectors to kind of compare the results, right? Okay, if all the detectors are showing similar trend, then maybe there's something here. If all the detectors are showing something different, then maybe there's nothing, and it's just the detector that is the problem. That's one way to look at it. then the other thing that we do is that if when possible, this is not always possible, if we have writing from this writer pre AI, like November 2022, the proliferation of ChatGPT, which was November 2022, we can compare previous writing to current writing and see if there is a difference in patterns, right? And then the difference in detectors. So we use the detector for both pre and post and see what results come out, right? But that's not always possible because you don't have people that are being writing for you. And as time goes by, it would be harder and harder, right? Because we'll just get further from November 2022. So that's another that we have used. We use the keystroking recording app. And I don't know, I'm sorry, I'll try to figure out the name. Somebody in our team knows the name of the app. We only use it for one client that was very, very adamant about it because, again, I don't think that's the way to do things anyway. And then the last, we use editors and just different set of editors. So also kind of red team, black team, or just kind of one checking the other's work to make sure. The last thing that we want is penalize a writer unjustly. But that leads me to, I guess, the million-dollar question, John. Does it even matter? And where I'm going with this is, we're all, at least on our end, we believe in creating the best content possible for the internet. That's what we believe in. And when we say the best content possible, it's not that it reads well and that is grammatically correct. It's like, are you really bringing something new to the table? Are you entertaining? Are you engaging? Are you educating? Are you really reaching the goals of your audience? That's what matters. So does it even matter if it is AI or human? And by saying that, I also would say that there's like AI writes way better than many writers.
Better than me.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like he writes way better than. But I'm not a writer. But even some people that are writers or have chosen writing as a profession, AI has been writing much better than them. So anyway, at the end of the day, does it even matter whether it's AI or not?
Yeah. So I think it depends on your use case. So I think this is a question that society is going to wrestle with. So I'll go a little high level and try and sort of, this is a question I think about a lot. If you're reading a baby formula review, I think society has decided that there's locations where AI content we don't want. If if you go online to read user-generated reviews, you want to know that that's human and somebody that asked AI to write you a review. I think that's pretty clear. That one's like on the spectrum of like, I don't care if it's AI or I really care if it's AI.
Can I just interject there? How about like for shitty writers like myself that cannot put two words together, and I just kind of have to bomb in my words and then get AI to paraphrase them so another human can read them. Is that okay? Like, you know what I mean?
I would, and then I know that you had reviewed that after. I would happily read that review of yours if you were like, yes. Yes, but unless the method, I would rather read your poorly written. I know you're being falsely humble, but like I'd rather read your poorly written, bummed together review and know with certainty that that was human generated than have to do a Turing test to predict whether or not I believe that was AI generated or a human generated review. So I think the answer to that one is I'd rather read a poorly written human review than an uncertain, well-written review. So I think I'd say that's like the extreme one. If I'm trying to quickly find out the score from last night's hockey game, if I hadn't watched it, I don't care if it's AI generated. I care that it's factually correct, but I don't care if a human wrote it or not. So I think that's like the other extreme. It's murky in the middle, like the world that we live in of writing content and publishing it on the web. I'd say like a thought experiment of if Google search results were filled with nothing but AI, and so if we sort of focus this question around like why do we care, specifically focused around digital marketing and ranking in Google, if Google search results were filled with nothing but AI generated content, why would we go to Google? Why wouldn't we just go to the AI, enter the question, get the answer? That's a personal assistant AI that's probably going to know a whole bunch more about us and be able to answer far more specific than the result. I think Google knows that. Pretty smart people, they know that. they also need to be this really AI forward company, launching Gemini, launching the AI overviews, really fine line for them to walk. They don't want to have their Kodak moment here and let the technology that they invented disrupt them and not be the ones that disrupt themselves, yet they can't kill their golden goose at the same time. So really tricky position for them to be in. I'm sure there'll be a bunch of case studies around 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road on how they handle this moment. What we see is AI is increasing the amount of content in Google is increasing month over month. Last we checked, so we're checking monthly from pre-ChatGPT, scraping archive, running a study, looking at multiple hundreds of thousands of records, and we're seeing a 13% of search results right now are AI generated. That compares to I think there's like 4% pre-ChatGPT, so like when GPT-3 existed. And then what we saw on the March 5th update in particular was Google went and nuked a ton of sites. Those sites were we looked at those sites that got nuked. Those sites, the majority of the sites had the majority of their content was AI generated. And I think the story that comes out from this data is that, you know, not all AI content is spam, but no one is spamming the internet right now and not using AI. Like not all AI is spam, all spam is AI. And so that all kind of leads to Google is fighting AI content, but only trying to fight spammy content, yet AI content leaves markers. Google runs the risk of penalizing sites that shouldn't have been penalized, as they have always done when they apply algorithm updates and there's collateral damage. And so I think there's no question that publishing AI content increases your risk compared to not publishing AI content. Do we care is a societal question that's going to get worked out over the next few years. But if we focus specifically on Google, I think all data points to publishing AI content increases your risk of getting wrapped up in a Google update.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. There is always collateral damage. There is always, good innocent people that falls into the people that are being impacted. But I also agree that every time there is a new tool or a new opportunity, let's call opportunity or window of opportunity in the market, there's going to be people trying to exploit it.
Yep.
That's just human nature. And this industrial grade machine to create content has help a lot of people or people have been tempted to, inundate or just populate their sites with this content to rank and to manipulate the algorithm. And Google has been pretty against it. And they call it automated content. They don't even call it AI because, of course, in the trick situation, they cannot call it AI content. They need to just kind of maybe call it something else. But I think at the end of the day, people should be using AI to make their process, to find efficiencies in the process, not necessarily to bring insights and try to bring answers. You're totally right. If you can put a prompt on ChatGPT to create a blog, to answer a question, to answer it or speak about a topic, so the same person, so the reader can do that also, right? They can just put the question in ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever you want to call it, right? So you're not adding any value. You're not even brokering here. You're just kind of I don't even know what to call it, but I think it's okay in our view, in my personal opinion, to use AI, for many use cases, maybe to help you kind of get off writer's block, or maybe some idea generation to kind of go and refine your idea. So maybe help you summarize, or again, if you're not sure that you're writing or what you want to say is coming or being articulated properly, you can get AI, hey, help me put this in a more succinct way, or maybe repurpose it to this other way. I think as long as you're putting something insightful, you're bringing something new to the table, I think it should be fine, right? Or maybe you're also curating a lot of different pieces of content and really putting a lot of work to make the internet better and make the world better with content. I don't know. That's maybe my view, but I think, John, you have more to say about that.
Yeah, so I'd say I agree. Like I'm not anti AI content. We have AI content published on our site. Our AI research team are all English as a second language individuals, outrageously smart. Their intelligence isn't communicated in their writing. as effectively as it is when they use ChatGPT or another AI tool to help them communicate what their research has been about. So I think it absolutely has a great use case. I think again, with this audience, it's like there's a risk with it, and there's a benefit to it, and the publisher, the one that's hiring the writers, should be the one that is making the decision on when to make the decision on when AI gets used and where it gets used, and ultimately be the one that benefits from the efficiency savings. I think a lot of people are happy to pay a writer $100 for an article, $1,000 for an article, whatever that rate might be. Not super happy to find out that the writer copied and pasted it out of ChatGPT in 5 seconds, even if that is the absolute best sort of article in the world for that specific search term, adds incredible value, is the best in the world. There's a fairness component that doesn't get totally in balance if that was the case.
Yeah, but I think it's very hard to say it's going to be the best, probably the best in the world just by doing it in 5 minutes. Like,
agreed.
Anyway, so let's change gears, because I know we're running out of time, but I really want to touch on this, which is fact checking. I think this is a more interesting and better thing to focus on, which is fact checking. And it's funny because again, OpenAI and Google, they keep hallucinating and getting it wrong. So how can, your tool also has a fact checking component, which I'm very much more interested than in the AI detection. So tell us a little bit more, and how can you guys get it right, given that, again, these big players still get it wrong. So how you guys tackling that?
So we're not getting it right, and that's why it's still in beta. So we're getting it more right than the raw LLM, but it gets it wrong enough that it's we're not even close to the level of accuracy that we are at with detection, and that's why it's in beta, and we still call it a fact checking aid. And so when an editor gets a piece of work, like gets an article, what do they have to do? Check it for AI now, if they have to, if that's a requirement. Check it for plagiarism, readability, grammar, spelling, fact checking. These are a bunch of the tasks that an editor does, and originality is meant to be an editor's AI assistant to help them do their job 10 times more efficiently. That's sort of where we're working to. Fact checking is a big part of their process. The way the fact checker works is it looks at every fact in an article, retrieves a bunch of information from Google, the same way that you would do if you didn't have any knowledge of that topic. References, and then compiles a whole bunch of information, sends it to another LLM, and says, now LLM, given this sort of additional context, is this statement factually correct or not? It sometimes produces some really sort of magical outcomes where an article might say the boiling point of water is 90 degrees Celsius. Quickly we might say, no, that's wrong. It's obviously 100 degrees Celsius. But the articles about mountain climbing and previously referenced the elevation that they were climbing at, and then says, hey, actually, based on that elevation and this chart from this website over here, 90 degrees is the correct boiling point. Pretty cool outcome. Doesn't always get it right though. So it's whatever the accuracy rate of the base LLM is, it lifts that accuracy rate, but it's a very computationally intensive way of lifting that accuracy rate. But it does provide a whole bunch of links and references and a simple analysis to help editors do a more thorough and accurate fact check.
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting use case, because as AI becomes more popular, well, there'll be more hallucinations and more unchecked stuff, right? And sometimes even the editor doesn't know the facts because they're just everybody's kind
they're
of
really good at editing, not a mountain climber. Yeah.
And everybody's pulling from the same pool of information, right? Everybody's Googling stuff. And so anyway, so what is next in terms of AI detection tools? Now it's very focused on writing or large language models, but also we're thinking about images, we're thinking about video. Like what's next? What's coming on that end? And I don't know how important that is.
Yeah. So we're not going to build a best in class image detector or voice or video. That's at least our current philosophy. the volume of detection that's needed is lower compared to text. The sensitivity to each one needing to be perfect is significantly higher. Is this image? You really need to have a good, firm, certain answer, and there's a lot less data that is available, similar to the Chrome extension, to be able to sort of recreate that image to know if it's true or not. I mean, OpenAI is putting in some work. I think there's going to be it's a far more regulated world, and I think the societal harm that will come from an image, video, or an audio is going to be higher than the societal harm that will come from any individual piece of text. The cumulative harm from sort of a mass text propaganda campaign could be high, but the sort of individual harm that comes from a single article will be lower than the societal harm that could come from a deepfake video or deepfake audio. So although it's a significant problem, it's not one that we're going to sort of we're not planning to stick our head into that meat grinder.
Yeah, no, you're right. I haven't thought about it that way, but yeah, the impact to society could be really harm could be much higher. Especially, I'm thinking of deep fakes of impersonating people, famous people or politicians or anybody in authority and with power via voice or video, even just pictures. Yeah, pretty high risk. So
I think because of that.
Yeah, what?
I was gonna say because of that, I think that's where like the people in power are the ones that are most susceptible to being harmed by these deepfakes, and they're going to be the ones that push the regulation to try and avoid that. And I think that's what we've seen in terms of what forms of media are being initially regulated from a watermarking standpoint.
Yeah, well, we shall see what's how that evolves. This has been a fascinating discussion, John. Any other comments, takeaways, or anything that you want to leave with your audience before we wrap it up?
Yeah, no, it's always fun to chat on this topic, and especially when there's some differing views. But no, I think it's hopefully people have learned something from some slightly different views.
Yeah, well, you can check out originality.ai and see all the cool stuff that they're doing, the Chrome extension. So yeah, John, thank you very much. You've been extremely generous to our audience. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll have the recording when it's edited and ready. We'll ship it out for all of you to reference and for the ones that weren't able to attend. But thank you all, and thank you, John. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.